Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk about Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. So as usual, we're going to talk non-spoilery thoughts up front and then move over to the spoiler section where we talk pros and cons, and I'll wrap up with my overall thoughts and feelings on the book as a whole. So with that being said, remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So, Skyward is one of the first non-Cosmere Brandon Sanderson books I've ever read, and I like it. I'll just start off by saying that from the get-go. Apart from fantasy, sci-fi is my favorite genre to read. I love big epic sci-fi, and I love even subtle sci-fi and stuff like that. And this is kind of in the area of YA sci-fi, so it reminds me to a degree of the level of reading of something like the Pretties series by Scott Westerfeld. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of that, but it reminds me of kind of that level, something like that. But being written by Brandon, it's a little more meat to it. It's a little, it's a little thicker. So the Skyward is about a young girl named Spencer who is the member of one of the colonies that have been basically shipwrecked on this planet named Detritus. So something happened in the past, and like 80 years ago, humanity basically crash landed on this planet and has been like living on this planet. And every time they try to get off this planet, there's this giant alien force that's basically right outside that's constantly like trying to stop them from getting off world. So that alien species is called the Krell. So in order to deal with this, they have to send their best pilots, and all of their best pilots are the young people. So it's kind of like Ender's Game a little bit in that way. So the main character Spencer is 17, and she wants to join flight school so that she can become one of the pilots and stuff, and be like her dad, who was a pilot before her, and like make everybody proud and stuff like that, and actually get off world, because it's one of those big dream things about reclaiming the stars. It's almost a little bit like Attack on Titan, like a claiming the world outside the walls and stuff like that. It's a little bit like that. At least I think of it like that. So that's kind of the setup. Our main protagonist, Spencer, she is trying to become a part of flight school so that she can take on these aliens and try to help, progress the efforts of humanity and like take over, and pretty much get out of the little slums that they're living in, because the aliens have the ability to attack them on the surface of the planet. So they live in caverns and caves and stuff underground. So it's like a very, squalid existence. Not a lot of fun. So because they are in like flight school and like flight academy kind of school situation, Brandon has the ability to create this nice little tight knit group, because they have different flights, which are basically just groups of pilots that all fly in formation and all that kind of stuff. So Brandon like creates this cool group dynamic between the characters, and like Spencer is very different than everyone else because there's like all this like her dad like has a terrible reputation, and it kind of spilled over onto her. So people are basically always downgrading her and stuff like that, and like kind of treat her like stuff like crap or whatever. And in order for, the way she deals with, and Spencer has like trauma and stuff because of like the way her dad died and all this kind of stuff and being treated terribly. So the way she deals with it is by being like all acerbic and like all mean and all this kind of stuff. So she's got this very rough, kind of rough and tumble sort of personality, and very brash, almost like you say anything that she can take as a slight, she'll jump down your throat as a result of it. So it's very common teenager kind of thing. But to me, it got a little old a little bit, because I mean, I don't know, because I'm 30, so it's like somebody who behaves that way, I'm like, God, kid, like shut up. Like it just kind of feels like that a little bit. So I kind of had a lot of that going on. So it might be different for anyone else that reason, but for me, I was like, God, like just chill out, just say what you mean, just be up, like do the thing that teenagers can't do. Like I guess so, it was that kind of thing. But yeah. So apart from like the great group dynamics and stuff Brandon creates in here, he also weaves in some mysteries. So there's like, you're trying to figure out like, why are they here? How did they get here? What went down before? Why is this alien species like after them and all this kind of stuff? So like it kind of gives you all these questions that you want to answer, want answers to. And by the end of the book, we get like so many answers and all this stuff. So it's a great, I wouldn't really call it a mystery, but there's a really good amount of reveals that happen in the story, story, and I definitely don't want to spoil them. So I'm going to leave off the spoiler section by saying this is a really great story. I definitely recommend it. The characters are real well fleshed out and well thought through, and like have really good distinct characterization. The plot itself is really clean and it flows very seamlessly. It's, you know, on the YA level, so don't expect anything like like crazy philosophical or deep or anything like that. It's just a very fun, straightforward story. And the world itself that Brandon creates, wow, I love world building. Like that is my jam. Like it's just all of that. Like he kind of holds some of that back because it has to do with the reveals. So don't kind of get discouraged as a result of not knowing everything, because it's all a part of it. So I'm going to leave it there because that was kind of touching it a little bit. So with that being said, let's jump over to the spoiler section. So spoiler warning for Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. So, over here in the spoiler section, let's start off with one of my cons. So, I mentioned it a little bit in the non-spoiler section. My first con is going to be like the teenagery nature of Spencer. Like, I understand everything, like why she is the way she is, but just the nature of her attitude, like her kind of just being confrontational for no real reason, and like always having to bluster yourself up and try to seem like you're better than somebody else, like it just gets tiring. So while I understand it and I can see it and it feels justified, it's like you can't help but, you know, get tired of it after a while, honestly. So Brandon did something with Spencer that I really like. I thought it was really cool. She, you know, despite them being technically very far in the future and all this stuff, and you know, Earth society being so far in their past that, you know, most of them just have no connection to it at all. So Spencer's grandmother actually tells her all these stories about mythology and like all these ancient battles and all this kind of stuff. So she kind of internalizes it and like sees herself as like one of those ancient warriors. So that's primarily like the reason why she gets so antagonistic and like, you know, blustery and like kind of attack people in a way. So it makes sense and I understand it, but you know, you just want them to grow up a little bit sometimes, and then like, yeah. So let's move over to a pro. So one of my biggest pros in the book is just the reveals, the way Brandon sets up these reveals and the explanations of these mysteries that are set up. Like I love it so much. A lot of it is just kind of like an avalanche at the end of the book, where especially in the epilogue where we get all this information and stuff like this about like this ability that she has and like and the way she kind of can teleport, but like it also gives her the ability to listen to the Krell like as they communicate and stuff like that. But it also makes her vulnerable because like that was what happened to her dad, like and all this kind of stuff. Like I really like the world that's being set up. So I'm going to call it world building as the pro, but it's, you know, I mean, I guess it is still technically world building, even if it is all thrown in at the end. So I just really like that stuff. I love big epic sci-fi stuff. I like, you know, world spanning, like I mean, you know, galaxy spanning kind of societies and just interconnected societies and worlds and stuff like that. Because the idea that they're all on detritus as like a prison planet, because humanity has been pretty terrible throughout the galaxy, which you know wouldn't surprise pretty much anybody, I don't think. It's kind of like it's that in and of itself is so intriguing because I want to know what's going on behind that. Like what happened? Like is there like an intergalactic council of multiple species or something like that from like one of the Star Wars prequels? Like were they all in like a floaty room? Like oh these Earthlings are too freaking dangerous. Like we got to conceal them somewhere. You know we got to lock them up because they keep trying to take over worlds where there's people or something like that. So they like lock you know the remnants of humanity on detritus or something. So I really like that. So it got me really looking forward to the second book. Con number 2. This is really more of a character action thing more than having to do with the way it was written or anything. But Ironsides, like I get the whole reason, like the fact like they call Spencer's dad a coward and all this stuff because he was being controlled by the Krell and thought he was fighting the Krell, but he was actually attacking his own people, and like that was why you know he's so ostracized, and why Spencer's so ostracized and all this kind of stuff, and he was called a coward, and they basically make it seem like cowardice can like literally be genetic and rub off on her, which is why they were giving her such crap and all this stuff. Like I kind of get the whole fear of because we know that the cowardice is really just this ability that they have, which allows them to be vulnerable to the Krell in the way they communicate and send orders and things. So, like we understand that, but like because like it doesn't, to me it doesn't justify treating Spencer as terribly as they did, like not letting her sleep with the other cadets and like making it tough for her to eat, and like to the point where she literally had to be in this cave, and like in order to get to the place where she, in order to get to school basically on time, she couldn't even go back home because it was too far away, so she had to like live in this little cavern that she found, like this little hidden offshoot. Like it was so terrible. Like I get the reason for trying to keep her out of flight school and all that stuff, but then to just treat her and her family so terrible and like have them all, like it just, yeah, it rubbed me so wrong. And it was like it's so much extra for no reason. Like you could have even like, if you wanted to be really smart about it, you could like hyper encourage her to do something else, open all these doors to get her in a totally different like area and totally out of flight school or whatever, and then it wouldn't have even been an interest, so you wouldn't even have to worry about that issue at all. So maybe that's one of the things of it like being a YA versus like adult kind of thing, because there's multiple other ways that could have been handled and not just been so obviously make yourself look like a Snape type villain, at least early Snape. So yeah, I had an issue with that. So let's go on to pro number two. Pro number two has to be Mbot. Just Mbot in and of himself. Like Mbot is like one of the coolest little companion characters ever. And then I shouldn't even say little because he's a giant starship, or not even starship. He's a fighter. He's a space plane. He's a whatever. Like he's this badass fighter jet. And so Mbot is this really cool badass like AI spaceship that she finds when she goes into her little cavern and stuff. And he becomes like the dragon and the girl and her dragon companion, kind of the trope, right? So Brandon gives this really cool character this insanely snarky, fun, very overly literal, and like almost cliche computer type way kind of companion character, and I love it a lot. I thought it was a lot of fun. But and like and similar to that show Ridley Scott made, Raised by Wolves, like the AI in there has been basically reprogrammed to not remember how it works, or all of that kind of stuff. So he basically just has the programming to locate mushrooms, basically. So like he doesn't know who created them or how it worked or anything like that. But we kind of suspect that he's a badass epic AI that probably is one of the types of ships that humanity used to get such a terrible reputation all around the galaxy. So it's really, really cool. And the idea of the sentient AI that Brandon's kind of playing with, because like the argument or the idea is kind of tossed out a few times whether or not he's truly alive or whatever, but it's kind of brushed off. But by the end, he writes it in such a way that you are meant to have this opinion. It's meant to be very clear that yes, he is, but they don't explicitly come out and say it. So I thought that was really cool, really well done in that way. And for my final con number three, will have to be just something that's like a comparison thing. So the story, as I mentioned earlier, this story kind of reminds me a little bit of Ender's Game, and it kind of reminds me a little too much of Ender's Game. It feels a little bit like Brandon kind of, I'm sure he's totally familiar with Ender's Game, but it feels like he wanted to do his own version of it, but, stretch it out, change it a little bit. And I can't not notice that, so it kind of takes me out of it. And the similarities to Ender's Game, like, I almost feel like we didn't get enough of. Like, some of my favorite parts of Ender's Game was like all the training and stuff like that when they come together as a team and all this kind of stuff. So we get a good chunk of that, but it kind of happens in spurts, and I would have been okay with like that being basically the whole story. Like just cut back to a couple other characters occasionally, but like just send their entire flight out there to go deal with the Krill, and they're just like out there. Like I would just get a lot. I would just enjoy that a lot, but that's totally personal taste. So yeah. And pro number three has to be the reveals and the setup. So everything that Brandon basically ends the story with is just like opens the door to all of the stuff that we didn't know. And I like that hit me the hardest. Like I finished this with the biggest smile on my face, because just the promise of everything that we get to learn, everything that's like going on out there, everything that has to do with her powers, the way she teleports, and the way there's like this dark space thing or whatever, the nowhere or whatever that is or whatever, and like all this kind of stuff. Like it's really cool, and it sets up all this stuff. Like I was saying earlier about the idea of humans being on there as like a prison planet kind of thing. Like I really love the idea that we're going to learn more about what that is, like what's going on with that. And the Krell are all like, also reminded me of Ender's Game. The Krell are like drones, pretty much our artificial hive mind, but like, so the people, they've been losing people fighting these things that aren't even manned. Like they're not, like, so it's just there's so much that comes out at the end. There's so many reveals and stuff like that, and it just sets up all this really great stuff. It sets up so many promises for the future, and I just can't wait to figure out everything that's going on. So I just can't wait to read the next one. That'll wrap up my pros and cons. Now, my general thoughts for the book itself. I really liked it, like as I've said multiple times already. I enjoyed it. It's a good story. It's more in my brain the way I'd categorize it. It's like very good for YA, but if I was to categorize it in the same way, I'd think of like adult fantasy and stuff like that, or adult sci-fi. It wouldn't be, up there. It's not, it's not all the way up there. But for like a YA genre area, kind of that level, I think it's really good. I think the reveals are even beyond YA level. Like some of it is like so subtle and like kind of not even explicitly explained that, it kind of makes you flex your brain a little bit. So I really dig it. And just the way the magic and all that kind of stuff, or the magic works, is really interesting too. So it's really good. I like it a lot, and I definitely recommend it. The writing here is done well as always. Like Brandon's at this point in his career and his writing style and stuff like that. That if it's bad, that'll be the thing to talk about. Like, because the characters are really well fleshed out. The plot is, very clean and straightforward and told really well. The pace is nice. The pace is almost perfect, because the way he's able to pace up to the reveals make the reveals that much more fun and made me enjoy it that much more. So the thing that really hooked me is the stringing on up to the reveals. So everything else was a lot of fun. I really liked the dog fighting in space and stuff like that. That was cool. But the thing that really hooked me was trying to figure out what the heck was going on. Like, I just wanted to know what all of this was about. So very good job on that stuff. So as I said multiple times already, I definitely recommend this. This is a great story that's not inside the Cosmere, but it's another great piece of work from Brandon. So I definitely recommend it. So that'll do it for this video. Did you guys read Skyward? What did you think about it? Let me know in the comments down below. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to you all next time. Peace.